All right, this is part 2 of our P12 portfolio sample machine buttonholes. And I'm over at the machine now. I have the piece that we marked together in part 1, and I have that button that we measured that measures about a half an inch. And then I have 2 buttonhole attachments here. This is for the Bernina machine. I'm going to set him over here just a moment because I'm working on my baby lock right now. And it has one of these plastic attachments for buttonholes, which probably the majority of you have something like this. Unless you have some of the more higher end machines, they may have something like this one, like the Bernina, or it's actually completely built into the computer's operation, and you really don't change much of anything. You just program it, and away it goes. Okay, so the first thing that we need to know is both of these, no matter what we're doing, we will have to remove the foot to put it on. And before I do that, I want to point out on this one, we'll look at that in a little bit, but we're going to look at this one because I think a majority of you probably have this foot, or one that looks like this anyway. They can be different lengths, different widths per manufacturer. But I want you to take a look at what is happening here in this so you understand the markings. Notice I've gotten rid of my 5/8 inch tape over here, and that was primarily because I needed to get into my accessories underneath there and get this out. You can have it there, you can do without right now. I will put it back when we're actually sewing on the pant, the seams, and etc. So I mentioned that this is going to come off, and on these there's this little bar here. See that little metal bar? This is where it snaps on to the machine at, and we'll look at that. Then I wanted to point out that I don't know if you can see this, but there is an A engraved in here, that it's foot A. So we'll want to know that we got what foot number or letter you're using. And then there are some guide marks here. There's some green out here, and that means that the buttonhole is in alignment to start to do its thing because there's these red ones there. That's going to be the end of the buttonhole. So we want those green and red to always match up when we're getting ready to start something. And this one, the red right there, that indicates the center of the buttonhole, which is really the line that you drew in with the chalk. So we're going to position that right on there. Okay. Now, on the back end of your buttonhole attachment, there will be something, there will be these little guides here, right? And then at the very back, it will open up. Let's see if I can get mine open up today here. Right there. And it slides and varies. This is where you put your button in. So I'm going to set my button right in there. And I'm going to close it. I'm going to put him upside down because he's rounded. He'll probably lay better. There we go. So he's in there. That distance, even though it's kind of covered it a little bit, is telling the buttonhole attachment how big of a buttonhole you need to make. And it's really right here. When you slide it tight, make sure that it's tight in there. It will separate these two for the size you need. Now we said that was a 1/2 inch button. And now the space though that it opened up to is the 3/4, like we marked it for. So the buttonhole is giving it, the buttonhole attachment is giving it that little 1/8 of an inch on either side to adjust for. Okay, so now let's get it on the machine. So my machine has a little release lever in the back. Some of you may have to completely remove it. It doesn't snap on and off, and you will have a little screw, a lot like the thumb screw on your needle, there might be a little screw down there, or you might have to have one that you get your little screwdriver out and you take the whole part off. Because see, if I would take my screwdriver on that one right there, it would take this part off, the shaft part off. But in my case, it snaps on and off. We don't have to put a whole like shaft shank onto the machine. So we're going to put this away. So you might have it different. Make sure you look in your book or in your online instructions, a manual. You'll find how this particular attachment goes on your machine. So now generally, what I want to do is I still want this top thread to go through this opening right there. So I like to, this one right there, I like to, where the needle's going to be, I like to pre-do that so it isn't quite so hard to get there. So I've put it through the little needle hole and I'm lining it up, and now I'm going to lower my pressure foot right down into that so that it clips on, and now it's on. Now it'll look like this. It's got flexibility. Okay. And back in the back there, there's still that distance right here. It's keeping that, making sure my buttons in there tight. So now there's one thing more you need to do on machines that have this kind of a buttonhole attachment. On the Bernina, or maybe you have a different one that has it more automatic in your machine, there is an eye here. And that eye is also coordinating itself as a memory thing when you set how long you want your buttonhole to be. So we said it was a 1/2 inch, which I don't know off the top of my head the millimeters, because this is in millimeters. And you would just move this little red dial to the millimeters. And that looks about like a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch, because it's coming from right there to there, somewhere in there. And that is then what you use as your guide. But we'll look at that again in a little bit when we talk about Berninas. So now we've got the foot on, and there's one more thing, as I said, that has to happen on these kind of machine buttonhole attachments. Those two things back there are telling it how far apart the machine needs to go to make the length. But there's also a little thing up in here. And if you can see that, there is a drawing on it, or a raised embossed thing that has a buttonhole, like the symbol for a buttonhole back there. It's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I move a little light on it. You can get a little better look. Yeah, there we go. So that is the buttonhole, and it has arrows up and down. You need to make sure this is all the way down and it's on behind the first little thing over there. So I'm going to move my machine just a bit so you can see that at an angle. See, it's behind that first little lever that doesn't move. He's permanent there. The one back there moves based on what your buttonhole is doing, your button size is. Now we're going to bring this back down, and I want to make sure that it's behind that lever, not in front of it. If it's in front of it, it won't do its job. What happens is this little lever is stationary, but as the buttonhole moves, it hits that back one back there, and that tells the machine in the buttonhole to stop and go over to the other side. It tells it how long to make it. All right, let's now get some fabric under the machine and let's try it. So here's our sample piece that we prepared for our portfolio skills sample. And now, two things. You need to find out first which way your machine is going to go. Meaning, when I start and create an end, is it going to go backwards for the buttonhole? Or when I start and end, is it going to go forward? Most of these plastic attachments, it goes backwards. For the Bernina, remember I had moved this little red thing? It goes forwards. So the first thing that I'm going to do is look at my book to see if there's a directional plan. And I'm going to assume that this is a plastic one. And since this has to come up like this and meet that, that makes sense that it has to go backwards to make that happen. So then the next thing is my needle right now. Okay, we need to get our program what we're going to do. Now, some of you may have dials. Some of you may have the electronic pad. And I'm just going to show you again here real quick. I'm going to move my pad so that you can maybe see this just a minute. Okay. So I'm going to take it clear back, cancel, okay, delete that pattern. I'm going to take it back to my original stitch. My straight stitch. This is my normal straight stitch. I'm in one of the straight stitches, okay? And that had said J for my foot. And I was working on a J. It's in the plastic, and it's a little hard to see. And it's down in the middle there. So it's a little hard to see it. But I was working in J. So now I'm going to find the buttonhole that I want. Again, you may need to look at your manual and see where you need to set your stitch length and your zigzag width, because basically the buttonhole is using the zigzag motion to do the back and forth and to make kind of like that applique. All right? And it's using the length because it's so close together. Lots of them you'll be setting on just 0, good old 0. Okay, so let's find on this pad the buttonhole. Well, there's one, but I don't want it rounded at one end. I want it squared at both. Oh, here's a whole bunch. There, it's pointed at one end. It's rounded with a little decorative bar at one end of it. There's the one I want. A good solid all the way around for this. Now, if I had fabric that I was concerned about, and I putting so many holes in it, and I didn't really need like a knit, you may want to use the one here where it's very scant. It's not a lot in between, because the knit is not really going to ravel on you. And then this one's just a little bit more in between. I think I made a sample of that. Let me show you what I'm talking about, the difference of that. So here is one all the way around. There's one where it's scant around it, right? It doesn't have as much heavy-duty puncturing of the fabric. And on a knit, the more you puncture it, the more iffy it is whether you're going to actually rip or make holes in the actual knit. Okay, so we want to choose that one. Now it went up there, that it tells me I'm in that. And it tells me I need foot A. It's really kind of weirdly there. And that's what this foot was. Foot A. It's in the plastic over there. Okay, so that's all I have to do. I don't have to worry about changing any of the bottom settings until you really maybe are working on a lot of specific specialty fabric. And maybe you'll want to learn what you can do to change some things up. But for the general buttonhole, which what we're doing, you don't need to change any other settings. We're going to use that setting. Okay, so now I'm going to reposition my machine, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, I think I have everything back in position now so that you can see. Again, this mark right there is relative to the center red mark that I had. And yours will have some kind of mark. It may not be color, It just has an indentation there. So you'll want to look for that. That's the center line. So we know we need to place it on there. The needle, that red mark, the needle isn't going to go there because the needle straddles on both sides of this. We're going to get buttonhole stitch on both sides of that. That kind of represents where we want to cut it when it's all done. So we want to make sure we line up our center point to that point. The next thing we want to line up when we're looking at it is this green and red marks. They represent this. And remember, I told you most of these go backwards. So we're going to start here, not there. That's why it's really important every time you get ready to do a buttonhole is set up the fabric that you're going to use and practice, which is what I did here, right? It's on our fabric, and I practiced making the buttonholes that I wanted, right? And refamiliarize myself with what my buttonhole attachment is going to do. Okay, so we're going to kind of tilt this down. We're going to line that up as best we can. We're going to lower this now and see if my little red marks are all positioned. And I think they are. Those going this way are on the blue line going this way, and the red is on the blue line going that way. All right. The next thing you need to know is always give it another look to make sure that this is pulled all the way down. Okay. And when a buttonhole is programmed like this, it actually has a cycle to it based on this, and you should not lift up the foot feed during the process. It will stop itself when it's completely done. If you stop and take your foot off of the foot pedal before it really has finished a cycle, it will be confused when you start the next one. It's going to move right to where you left off. So you always want to make sure and let it completely end, which I'll show you what that looks like. It gets really slow at the end and barely moves while it's doing its final little stitches. All right, here we go. Let's do our first one. I'm going to bury the needle to let it start. I'm also going to find my threads. This still applies. I don't know where they're hiding. There he is. So that I know that they're pulled away and not in the middle of my buttonhole, because that's not very much fun either. Having that extra like thread kind of messing things up. Okay, and then let's see where my bottom one is. Don't know where to go right to. There he is. All right. Over that, make sure it's right where I want it. Actually, I'm going to move it just a hair once since I moved it around. Okay, so I'm going to hold those two for the first couple of stitches. And what the buttonhole is going to do is it's going to start its bar tack, and then it's going to go backwards with a straight stitch. That's what mine does. Most kind of do this, and then it comes forward again, covering that straight stitch. That's why you need to do the tests every time to make sure you know what's going to happen when you start making a buttonhole, because they really are kind of hard to take back out. It can be done, but it is hard. Okay, here we go. So it's doing a whole bunch of tiny little stitches, and there it knew to come back. And now it's at the top, and it's going to do its like really tight stitch. And I must tell you that I am helping guide this. I'm not super pulling, but I'm not letting the machine like set and make a big knot. A lot of times with fabrics, that's the case, that the foot feed doesn't really like to move it when it's doing these tiny, tiny stitches. Now look, I have my foot clear down on the foot pedal. There, it stopped. Now I'll release my foot pedal. Now I can bring my needle up. Look how it bounced over there. It's ready to start a new one. Okay, so I'm going to pull it apart here and trim it. and see if that was a great sample. Well, that looks pretty darn cool. I like it a lot. So let us trim these threads before we make another one, because the more thread that you have that can get knotted up in this tight applique stitch, the more trouble you can possibly be giving yourself. Okay, let's do another one. All right, my red on the center line. Let's see where we're at with the green line. Looks pretty good. Now, see, this is important to do this, because otherwise your buttonhole ends won't line up when you put them in a row, right? Like on your shirt or wherever, if you have more than one buttonhole. And for us, we want the buttonholes to be across from each other. We don't want one to be lower than the other or higher than the other. So we do want to pay attention where we chose our starting and stopping points. And before I get all in here doing it, I want to get my threads a hold of them. There we go. Now we got some thread to do here. And we'll start again here. Make sure that I am on the red center and that my red cross and green marks are where they were before. And we're ready to go again. It will know what to do because you've got the bar down and you did let it completely stop before. So it's going down and it said, oh, there, I'm done. That's where it was supposed to turn at. It comes back up and now it's starting its tight little applique stitch back and forth almost in one place. I've kind of helped tug it. I didn't pull, I just kept it taut so that it wouldn't get hung up in one place, because it can do that for you. So you want to kind of be sure that you are helping guiding it and it doesn't get one big lump right there. I still have my foot clear down on the pedal. It's doing its knotting and now it's done. Lift my foot off the pedal. Raise the needle and it jumped over to its starting position again, so you know that it's all ready to go. If it wouldn't jump over like that, you know that you haven't completed the buttonhole to begin with. So that could be a problem. But that's why you do a bunch of these. We're going to have 8 on our actual sampler. If you want to, if you feel like you have gotten those down after a couple, you are free to try maybe one of your other settings. Just watch what the foot says, because it may tell you that you need to add something like a cord or change the zigzag width or something. So you want to make sure that you follow the keypad that tells you what to do with the foot. All right. We'll see you later. Bye.